background, making sure. Okay, so we're recording now. Um, so people can have their videos on if they want, or they can have their video off if you want. It's totally up to you. Just make sure that you're muted. You might be seeing people coming in as the for the next few minutes. There's over 30 people, I think maybe even around 40 or 50 people, I can't remember now, actually registered for this event. So we might see some people coming in. So again, like just make sure that you're muted and that you can keep your camera on or off, whatever you want to do. Um, if you're here tonight and you want a certificate for your PD time, then let's make sure that you type your name in the chat box so that Lisa can make sure that those certificates get out to you. And that's something that we do on all of our free classes. So if you're somebody who wants that sent out by email, make sure that you either make contact tomorrow by email or if or also you just type your name in the chat box. So okay. Okay, let's make sure that everybody's muted. Lisa, I think you might be able to do that on the back end of for you as well. So all right, so here we are. We're here at this hour-long class webinar about timeouts and why they don't work. So myself and Lisa are empowered parents. That is the parenting support service that we offer. And we like to make sure that all of the therapeutic parenting information that we give people is really backed by the new behavioral science and the new behavioral neuroscience. And the information that you're going to get here tonight is going to be some really forward thinking information around timeouts and, how they sort of historically got to us and some of the reasons why those of us who understand the neuroscience are kind of moving away from that approach. So I have this conversation with people a lot, either in groups and on webinars, and also in my individual practice. And I want you to know that even the world leaders in this neuroscience approach, clinical psychologists, PhDs in psychology and social work, and all of that, when they started to discover that there were better ways that were sort of relationally less damaging ways in order to help children learn how to be better emotional regulators, most all of them also said, geez, I wish I knew this information before. I would have done things differently. A lot of the people who we follow and use their works and have gone to their trainings would say the exact same thing. So while we're going through this material here tonight, you might notice that a part of you says the same thing, that, oh gosh, I wish I had known this now. I wish I had known this before. And I just want you to know that you're in good company if that's something that your brain says too. So you might see me looking down at my phone every now and then. I just want to make sure that Lisa's not trying to get me for anything. So be super compassionate. If you witness a part of you, like a part of you that might be critically thinking about things that maybe was taught to you, or even maybe ways that you were parented, or things that you might be saying, geez, I wish I had a do-over. I just want you to be really caring and compassionate towards yourself. And I want you to know that you're in really good company if that should happen. Myself, even, my kid, she's 24. And I can tell you that over the last probably 10 years after learning this information myself, there's a part of me that wishes that I could have a do-over as well. So there you go. So every time we do this workshop, every time we do our full 2-day workshops or our 5-week learning series, we always say to people, from our hearts to yours, congratulations that you're here today, trying to relearn or learn this material or unlearn some of it. that you know that you're part of a paradigm shift for parents and caregivers who are starting to use or very curious about relational parenting strategies that comes from heart to heart, as opposed to behavioral strategies, old behavioral strategies that look like timeouts and sticker charts and all of that stuff. And it's pretty surprising. Lots of people have sort of a jaw drop moment when we say that over the last 20 years, there's actually not much, almost zero, people would say zero research showing us that using behavioral strategies with our children, like consequences and reinforcements, are not the most helpful parenting tools. So, what do I mean by that? I mean, like, so here's a consequence, you know, you behave in a certain way, you get a timeout. If you behave in a certain way, you'll lose your recess, or if you behave in a certain way, you lose your iPad. And also doing all of this like reinforcement of, okay, so you behaved at school 3 days in a row, now you get a sticker, or you get Tim Hortons or something like that. So there is a lot of science about consequences and behavior and reinforcements and things like that in the labs with animals, not so much with humans. And we're very complex, you know. We're not the same as a rat or a monkey. And you know, we got to live in the real world. And our relationships with our caregivers is really, really important. It's like oxygen to our little people. And we can actually work smarter and not harder. So some of the strategies that we're going to be talking about here today are really based in neuroscience, in brain science, in attachment theory. And what we know is that if we move away from these consequences and rewards and move towards more relational interventions, it actually builds long-term resiliency in our children. And what I mean by resiliency is that you know, life is not easy. Life is going to send our kids curveballs and stressors and adverse experiences. And the definition of resiliency is that we can bounce back after these stressors in a way that still keeps us moving forward. And when we don't have resiliency, stressors in the world knock us off our tracks, and it's hard to bounce back to where you were before that adverse experience happened. And not only is a very strong relational connection important for basic resiliency to come back to where you were the before the stressor happened, when we have really good resiliency and strong relational bank accounts, basically with our caregivers, what'll happen is we can also move forward with post-traumatic growth in a bigger way. So there's lots of really good reasons why we want to move away from consequences and rewards and move to more relational strategies. So what do I mean when I say a paradigm? And there is a paradigm shift happening in the parenting world and in the caregiving world, in the counseling world, around moving away from harsh punishments. And like a paradigm is the way we see the world, the way we understand the world and interpret the world. It's sort of a mental map of how we navigate our world. And if we kind of got in a time machine and went back 100 years, we'd see some similar parenting approaches, and we'd see some that we look at and we go, oh, wow, you know, I can't believe we did that, or that was allowed, or because, you know, some of it was pretty harsh. And this whole hour is around that evolution of the next paradigm change. And you're on this wave of people who are here and interested in new material like this. You're on that wave of that being a part of that being a part of that paradigm shift. And that's how great growth happens in the evolution of us human beings. So when we change a paradigm, almost everything about it changes. So, Mona Delahook, people here might be familiar with her. She's written some fantastic parenting books and some fantastic books about social and emotional learning. She talks about this. She talks about this um, idea called the expectation gap. And what she really means by this is that, that it's really not uncommon for us parents, and I'm going to put caregivers, teachers, coaches, all in, in the same category here, that it's not uncommon for parents to assume that their children can self-regulate when a child is nowhere close to being able to do it yet. So children learn how to self-regulate as they grow. And when a child is emotionally dysregulated, we have to expect that those things are going to happen because their brains are not fully developed yet. It takes about 25 years for a brain to fully develop, around 25 in women, 28 in men. And so what that means is that the architecture and the structure in the brain is not even developed yet for people to have an awareness of how they're feeling and then develop a strategy and then use a strategy and to be able to be a good self-regulator. And being self-regulated doesn't mean you're calm all the time. Being a good self-regulator means I'm witnessing that I am experiencing this emotion and I'm going to make an adjustment and try to do something that helps bring some settling to my nervous system. And quite often parents have been fed this, I guess, material from either their doctors or people's counselors or teachers, or that kids should know how to self-regulate, and they don't. It's like trying to expect your kid to be able to walk before they can crawl or run before they can walk. And it's our jobs as the caregivers to role model emotional regulation and role model not exploding and being with our children when they're very emotionally heightened and assist in teaching them how to do this very complicated thing, which is called emotional regulation, which a lot of us adults don't have that skill set yet. So sometimes we're really expecting that kids are able to do this long before they have the skill set to do it. So I love teaching people about that. So Lisa talks about this all the time, is that like this whole idea that a child is doing something, they're displaying a behavior or displaying an emotion or saying or feeling or doing a certain thing. And this whole idea of you go away and we put them in a place where we close the door or turn their backs, they turn their backs to us. That's part of the timeout. And we turn our backs to them. Um, it's a little bit like fast food. It's a little bit like going to McDonald's for our supper all the time. It might feel easy in the moment, but there's really no lasting nurturing value in this approach. And we're going to talk a little bit about why in the long term this actually can be quite damaging if it's used a lot and consistently over the long term with people. Now, I do believe that there is one situation where a timeout is necessary, and that's for the parent. If the situation is so stressful that we are going to be like a volcano of explosion and somebody's going to get hurt with our words, or somebody's going to get hurt because we physically are really having a hard time at that moment, I can see where a timeout would be helpful, where I just need some safe separation right now, and I'm going to remove myself from the situation so I can regulate and I can come back in. That's a situation where I think a timeout can be used. Um, so I just checked the chat box, so sorry for my distraction there. So the Therapist Parent is a fantastic Facebook page and a website if people are looking for resources, and they just posted this the other day, so I stole it from them. Our jobs at Empowered Parents is to teach parents how to be therapeutic in their approaches to their kids when they are when the kids are struggling and when the parents are struggling. So the fact that this is called the Therapist Parent, I love that. It sings to our heart because we're always trying to teach parents how to be therapeutic in their own interventions with their kids. And you don't have to be a neuroscientist to do this. So this is what they said about timeouts. So the hope is, and the strategy is, that the kids will be able to calm themselves down and think about what they did wrong. So but the reality is that children can't calm down alone. They actually need a grounded compassionate, witnessing, oh, I see you're struggling now, person along the side with them to be able to calm down. They don't know how to do it themselves. And they just can't think at that time because actually the logical part of our brain goes offline when we're really emotionally dysregulated, or our nervous system is in sort of a fight and flight state. I'm just going to really quickly tell you what's happening, why people can't think in those moments when they're emotionally dysregulated. So when we're emotionally dysregulated, if we were scanning my brain and just say I was having a tantrum, or we don't like the word tantrum, we use the word flood, like a significant amount of things are happening, and now I'm emotionally flooding, and I don't have the capacity to deal with the stressors, so our nervous system floods, and that's just that's not character, that's chemistry, that's what happens to us. And so at that time, if I was scanning my brain when I'm flooding, I'm actually operating from midbrain right here in the limbic center of my brain. And in that place, I actually can't think logically. I don't know how to think logically. Where I can think logically and calmly is from this part of my brain right here, which is called your prefrontal cortex. And your prefrontal cortex takes 25 years to develop fully. The limbic part of the brain is already developed at birth. So it's very easy for children to live in midbrain, in limbic land, in the big emotional centers of the brain, because this part is already ready and developed before birth. So while we're waiting for this part of the brain to mature and cook and get myelinated, we have to have this understanding that our kids are going to live down here a lot, and they're going to be very emotional. Kids are emotional before they're logical, and that's just the reality. Even us as humans, if we are flooding, I mean, adult humans, if we're flooding, we're down here, and we're trying to use strategies to help us come back upstairs into PFC before we can start to use logic and think. So when our kids are flooding and they're down here, our job is to try to help walk them up from limbic center to PFC, and we got to do that together with them. And when they're separated from us and time out, we can't help them do that. So that's one of the reasons why this strategy just does not work. Because in theory, when we were taught to use this strategy, which was a strategy that was developed 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, probably. The same things were going on around putting kids to bed and letting them cry it out. And, some of the people who wrote those books about those strategies and timeouts would say things like, at that time, even if your baby cries to the point of throwing up, do not pick them up. It was all about your kid is going to manipulate you, and they're going to learn they're going to be too dependent on you. You're going to spoil them every time you pick them up. And now we know that that was wrong. We know that kids thrive and they're physically and emotionally more healthy in the long run, the more the parents went towards the children when they were dysregulated. So we have lots of research to show that. So one reason why this doesn't work is because you're not there with them. You can't teach them. You can't understand what was going on. And they actually can't think logically about what they did and how they might have done something wrong. So what really happens is that we separate ourselves from our children. They go in one direction and we go in another, and we say, you can come back when you've got this figured out. And what really happens is the feelings actually get bigger, or our kids get really good at stuffing the feeling down and masking what's going on. Um, they they don't really learn what else to do because there's no teaching moments in there, and they become very anxious and overwhelmed because they need to be with us when they're dysregulated. And I added some copy over here to the side, which I can't read now because I've got this. I got, sorry. So when we are what we're actually doing in timeout is not just a punishment. It's not just a consequence. It's a relational punishment. You don't get access to me until you figure this out yourself. So it's a relational punishment. And when we're punishing children because they don't have a skill set yet to do something like emotionally regulate, what I see, and the science would back me up on this because I have my own private practice where I see adolescents and adults for their therapy. What we do in the long run when we say you can't have access to me when you're in this way. What happens is children are very smart. They try to make sense out of this pattern. I get pushed away when I relate in this way. And so they're often left, we plant this seed of negative cognition, a negative self-view, a view of themselves that they take with them for the rest of their lives into their adolescenthood and into their adulthood, which I'm trying to help unwind and unravel in their counseling sessions as adults. So what people are left with, and they have relational disruptions from their caregivers, and there's a pattern of it, and they don't know why. I'm trying really hard, but I don't know how to do this. Nobody's teaching me the skill. They're not thinking like, well, I don't have the skill set to do this yet. Give me some more time and I'll figure this out. What they are left with is this negative self-view that there must be something wrong with me. I'm a bad person. I can't do anything right, and I'm never going to be good enough. They'll have some version of that. And that seed gets planted, and then we take that with us for the rest of our lives until we do maybe some inner child work as an adult with a really good therapist who can help us reparent ourselves. So um, that's what I can see in my adult practice. And I often say to people, well, where did you learn that about yourself, that you were never good enough, or I'm too much, or something like that? And, quite often we learned it from teachers and our parents and all of that. So like this parenting paradigm of children need to feel discomfort and pain in order to learn something is an ancient paradigm that goes way back to when the Greeks were developing democracy, and they had this strong paradigm belief that in order for us humans to learn something, we have to feel some level of discomfort. And what we know now is that that's not true. And it actually can be very damaging to us as humans. So, and this is the reason why. It's because human brains are wired for connection and wired for connection with our caregivers. We come into the world a full trimester too early because humans have evolved so quickly that brains are so big that if we stayed inside our moms for the next 3 months, birth would be impossible. So we're born with still another trimester after we come into the world. And we are so vulnerable to the outside elements. We are the only animals that are born that are this vulnerable. And we need our caregivers so desperately to stay alive. If we were out on the plains somewhere and watched a horse get born, like in an hour he's walking around and feeding, that's not our experience. We are still infants for a very long time, and so we are wired for our caregivers to see us and witness us and give us what we need when we toss a signal their way. So we're really good at when our babies were little and we go, oh, that little is oh, I'm settling down and I'm going to go to sleep. Or a specific cry is I'm dirty cry, I need food cry, or I'm tired cry. Like we're really good at reading the body language and the auditory language before our kids can ever speak of what it is that they need from us. And in a perfect world, the baby tosses that expectation to the caregiver picks it up and comes back and does the nurturing, feeds, changes, picks up bounces, rocks, hold the baby to the chest, all that kind of stuff. And the more we do that, the more securely attached our kids are, which is a really good thing. We don't have enough time to talk about attachment here tonight, but secure attached people do better in the world. And it all happens through this dialogue, which is not verbal most of the time, is I need something and the parent provides. So we are wired for connection. And, you know, this is just a little experiment to maybe do with your partners or do with your kids is, when we see somebody starting to get overwhelmed or get dysregulated, if we actually say to somebody like, wow, I can see that you're struggling right now, that is a way more beneficial way to help people calm down because it's in the witnessing, and in the compassion, and for us to say, wow, I can really see that you're struggling now. What is it that, you know, you might you might need from me? And if we do it through our hearts, not like, what is wrong with you? I can see you are very whatever at this moment. If we do it from our hearts and we say, I'm here with you. I can see that this is hard for you. I had a mom have a session with me the other day, and she was practicing with me. Um, her kid would, had a meltdown around a limit that mom had to put in place. And as parents, we had to put boundaries in place. There's no doubt about that. And our kids don't like it. And so she was practicing putting up the boundary and being okay with the kid being dysregulated. And what we were practicing is mom saying back to her, like, I can see you're really upset with me now because I had to do this thing or say this thing. And I'm sorry, that I have to do this, but I'm making the rules around this, and this is not safe. And I can see that you're upset. And the first thing that the kid did was cried and hugged mom. 2 sessions before that, they would have been having a very different discussion about her being this child being unreasonable and being disrespectful and all of that stuff. So I just think that that could be a little experiment to take out into your world is to actually witness someone's emotion and put name to it. So here's another thing that we know is that us humans, especially little people, are always seeking safety from the adults around us, and we are always co-regulating with each other. So if this is the adult, and the adult is calm, cool, and collected, and steady, and compassionate with the witnessing of what's happening with the kid, if that person is regulated and the child is spinning, then the longer that the adult can stay calm, cool, and collected and connected with empathy, care, and compassion, the spiraling of the child will settle because we're constantly co-regulating together. So this happens through a set of mirroring neurons right in the front of all of our brains. And so if we're dysregulated, the same force of energy with co-regulation is going to happen. The children get dysregulated. So there's great power and synergy in what's happening here with co-regulation. So the more calm, cool, and collected the parent is, the calmer the situations are. And quite often in timeout situations, everybody is in explosion and spiraling together. So we're trying to use that power for good, which is, let's use the power of the mirroring neurons and co-regulation so that we can co-regulate together calmly. So chaos is contagious, and so is calm. All of our moods and nervous system states are contagious to the people around us, and especially the nervous system of the adult, the caregiver, primary caregivers. And teachers are primary caregivers when parents are not around. Coaches are caregivers when parents and teachers are not around. So when the adults are more regulated, the children will be as well. And there's great power in we. How do we help each other out? We are way better together than we are separate. So also, we love to teach people this, is that, there's all kinds of time for teachable moments, but they're not the it's not the teachable moment is not in the heat of the emotion. So somebody told me one time that when somebody is out in the water and they're struggling to swim, and they might actually be in real danger and they might be taken in water. That's not the moment that we say, like, use your breaststroke and here's the timing of your arms. And as an adult person who learned how to swim, it's very technical to know how to swim. And I would say that learning how to emotionally regulate is probably even more technical. So in those moments when children are flooding, they're not teachable moments. If anything, they're the moments for us to say, how do I stay grounded and calm? And how do I connect in this situation? It's a that's our go-to when things are dysregulated, is how do we move forward with connection and care and compassion and ask connected questions. So we tell our parents all the time that you are the best strategy for your kid. You know your kid the best. There was this old paradigm years ago where we drop our kid who was having trouble with regulation off to the therapist's office. And the whole idea was that for an hour a week or every 2 weeks, that the therapist would teach the child how to emotionally regulate. And that's like such old school now. We do believe, and the science would back us up in this, and programs all over North America are popping up similar to ours, where when we teach the parents the neurology, the brain development, and the strategies of stuff to do and not to do, then there is this beautiful synergy that happens when you become the calming force, and we're actually trying to use the struggle of the kid. Maybe there's a pattern, maybe it's a transition, maybe it's a certain person, maybe it's that time of day, maybe that when there is more flooding happening, that we actually use the knowledge of the child, because children are super smart, about how are we going to work on this. And when we're together, collaborative working, the synergy of the we is a magical, powerful force. And so, on these really hard days, because there will be, because kids are not, their brains are not fully developed. They're gonna run with emotion before they do logic because of how the brain is operated. We want to move forward on these days that are really challenging, where there's a win-win situation. So the parents win and the kids win. And what I don't mean win by uh in the way that we would normally think about win. Timeout is not a win-win. Nobody wins in that situation. The parent might win for a couple of minutes because you get a rest or you get a break from the situation that's going on. And you might actually think you're getting a long-term win because this kid is feeling discomfort and they're going to figure this out, when that's not really the truth. But a win-win situation looks like I stay calm and I stay grounded and I go in and connect and figure out what's going on. What's the struggle for this kid? And then everybody learns, and we've got a strategy that we're starting to work on together. And that's a win-win situation. And so this is going to sound a little uh not so smart to say, but I firmly believe that, if you have a child and there's a pattern to their dysregulation or a pattern to their challenges, if we can stand back and get curious and less furious about this, and we just say, okay, this is very interesting. Here's a pattern. And this is the pattern that I get into with my kid at this time. And nobody wins. This is a lose-lose situation. That these are uh, gifts. They are these little slices of invitation to kind of go towards what the challenging behavior is, and to use it as a learning moment. Okay, there's an offering here that, we might have to do something different. Or there's an offering that says, oh, that's interesting. Underneath this challenge is a skill set that's lacking. I know we can build some strategies around this. Or my kid needs a little bit more TLC throughout the day in order to be more regulated throughout the evening. Like, who knows? If we're doing timeouts, we're never going to get to that place where we're going to try to figure out what this dysregulation is trying to teach us. I'd also extend it to this is that, like, and I talk to teachers about this all the time. Can we get really curious about what is it about this behavior or this situation that is so triggering to me that I'm the person who's flooding and it requires a timeout? And our children are our best teachers. And we're left with this really fertile ground of growth, either for the parents or for the children. And quite often it's both. I work with lots of adults and I'm trying to help them understand about this new relational way of parenting. And the formula is the same with our partners or a coworker or people that, we run into the same emotional flood. There's a pattern within us about this. And I'm working with lots of parents who are brave enough to say, like, okay, I think this is a me issue because I think this my kid is just doing what kids do, and they don't know how to regulate yet. But this is so triggering to me. Maybe I need to do a little piece of work on this. Quite often, what is being triggered in the adults when the children are dysregulated is some unfinished reparenting that we needed that we didn't get from the adults around us when we were younger. And either way, this is a slice of an invitation of how to move forward. If we get curious, compassionate, courageous, and we get connected to what the patterns are, there can be really big fertile growth here. So we know that the parent-child connection is the most powerful preventative tool for how our kids are going to function in the world with their mental health. It's it is the most powerful source that we have. It's like this emotional currency between kid and parent, and it is the buffer for our kids' mental health for the future. So when we want to play the long game with our kids, and we want our kids to be resilient and to be able to bounce back from stressors, this connection that we have with our kids is really the secret sauce in all of this. I'm checking my messages because Lisa is I'm going to pause here just to see if there might be some questions before we move into the next several slides. We talked about mirroring neurons and co-regulation. You might have to unmute yourself if you've got a question. We're going to stick around at the end after the recording is down to answer questions that people might have. So here is a beautiful picture of co-regulation or regulation. And so when our little kids are up in the storm up here and they meet our calmness, this is our nice co-regulation. So a dysregulated adult will never be able to regulate a dysregulated child. I'm not good at math, but that's some basic math there. I'm not sure if folks have heard about Ross Greene's Plan B parenting styles, and this is all really based in some neuroscience and research as well. He wrote a couple of really good books. One is called The Explosive Child. The other one is called Raising Human Beings. And he lays out this parenting approach, which there's three approaches: Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C. So Plan A is a parenting approach, which is really quickly described as the adult's way or no way, because I said so, and that's the end of the story. So that's a Plan A approach, which we know from science shows that our kids really don't do well for the long term with a consistent dose of Plan A. Now, there are some times when you need to use Plan A. If your child is running out into the road in a dangerous situation, you might have to run after them and say, no, and get them into a safe place. That's not a situation where you need to use Plan B. But in the context of a situation where we're parenting over the long term, what we know is if that there's no collaboration, it's just because I said so, and I'm making the rules, that Plan A approach doesn't necessarily build resiliency in our kids for the long term. On the other end of the spectrum, we've got Plan C, which is I'm just done. You do whatever it is you want to do. You make the rules. I'm done. I'm checked out. It's just too hard. You do whatever it is you want to do. And the kids make the rules. There's no limits, no boundaries, and they're just off on their own. And we know that that type of parenting style is not good for our kids either in the long run, because our kids are always looking at us or to us for structure, for boundaries, for safety. And that's our job as parents, is to create those sense of security and expectation. And, we make the rules because that's the best thing for our kids and because we love them. So kids miss out on that when they get plan C, which is just, I'm done. You just do whatever it is you want to do. In the middle, in the plan B approach, it is collaborative, it's empathetic. There's an assessment of what lagging skills are here that we might be able to strategically work on. And it's a very big piece of this plan B approach is really help me understand why this is so hard for you. Really help me understand with this really deep understanding that we get about the problem or the concern that we have for the kid. With this really deep, deep understanding, this empathetic understanding, we actually together as parent and child will collaboratively come up with a plan that is win-win. So the parent has got some expectations. The parent has got some ideas about how this is going to be. Let's use homework, for example. Homework is soon to be an outdated example because some schools are moving away from homework. So parents are like, well, the homework has got to get done. That's my boundary about this. Um, but the kid might say, well, my solution is I don't do homework at all. Well, that's not a win-win solution. The win-win solution is how are we going to get to the point where some of it gets done or parts of it get done. And then we've got some agreement and we've got a plan on how we're working forward. So this is a harder, it sounds like a harder plan, takes up more time when you explain it this way. But the plan B approach is so collaborative and empathetic. And what we know is that these plans have been used in all kinds of child-focused schools and agencies and even detention centers and all of that stuff, and they work really well. We help parents understand how to do this. So quite often when families are running into trouble and they tell me what's going on after people have had a teaching session about what plan A, B, and C are, and we say, oh, okay, sounds like we kind of slid back into A over here, or maybe you've just done some C over here, and how can we kind of get back into the middle again? So plan B is collaborative, and the plan is actually called the CPS plan, which stands for collaborative problem solving. And if you want to learn more about that, we're going to spend a significant amount of time in our upcoming workshop about how to actually walk people through a plan B uh, approach. And we do some acting and role modeling and things like that. So the plan B with Ross Green is a very excellent strategy. I'm not going to bore with this slide too much. There's a really big step in the plan B approach, which is like a really active listening and reflecting back what you're hearing and not offering solutions. The kids actually come up with solutions. And then we go and try to practice it. But there's a really big piece of the plan B plan, which is an empathy step, which is like, I really, really want to understand what is going on here. And we might think that the problem is something, but it's never really the problem that the kids are facing. So understanding can be really helpful. So we first learn to regulate our emotions with the adults around us and how regulated they are and the quality of the relationships that we're with. And so Jean Clinton, who is a super duper star in the early childhood world, if she was here, she would say, like, just keep going back to relationship, go back to relationship. And she would say to teachers too, like, there's we used to think the big R's were reading, writing, and arithmetic, and we forgot the biggest R, which is relationship, relationship, relationship. What we know is that the stronger and the more connected we are, adult to kid, it actually shapes the architecture of the brain in a way that creates more resiliency and more mental wellness. So us as the adults around our kids are actually creating architecture in the brain. Now, I did this presentation with a group of teachers. There was about 100 of them just a couple of weeks ago up in Labrador, and I said, "Folks, well, what do you think about that?" And a young teacher said, "Well, that's a lot of responsibility, isn't it?" And I said, "Yeah, it is. It sounds kind of overwhelming." Um, but the reality is that, if you are always with the big R relationship forward, even when we have to press press the brake on something and say, no, I'm sorry, we can't do this, or somebody's not safe, or you're not safe, or um, we have to put limits on things. We can still do that through the relationship by being real and being empathetic and being there with people when they actually don't like the boundary that we're setting. So, you know, the beginning of the word relationship is real, and that is where your power is, to be really connected, to be really empathetic, to be um, really witnessing people when they're in distress, even when we've got to sort of draw the line on something. So Lisa's texting me again. Okay. Uh, can people still hear me? Lisa said some people lost audio. Um, we've got 10 minutes, so I'm just gonna quickly go through our pillars at Empowered Parents that are really like a cheat sheet of how kids actually start to become better emotional regulators. And one really big one is positive connection time. So if you're doing a really empathetic audit of how much connection time you have with your kid, and it's kind of low on the scale, if we're doing more direction and correction, like get up, brush your teeth, get your hair done, get your leggings on, get out the door. Did you take your lunch? There's a lot of correction and direction goes into parenting. There's no doubt about that. And like I said, my kid's 24 and I'm still doing a lot of that. So uh, we gotta actually kind of have a look and say, like, how much really like connection time do we have? Like, are we playing together? Am I inquisitive about what happened today at school in a way? Like, tell me, I really want to know. What do you want for your breakfast? Let's cook some pizza together. Or maybe My Little Pony is your kid's thing. I can't tell you how many Disney princess tea parties I had, and which I didn't really want to have lots of times. But like, if you did a nice audit of your day, just how much connection time do I have? And if you're having a struggle with your kid being emotionally regulated, start there. Connection, 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 relationship, relationship, relationship. And that can be a really good place to start. And if you can't find time in your day, we actually have an activity where we say, we got to plan it. You got to find a way to do it, because this is like oxygen to their nervous systems. Connection, connection, connection. Daniel Siegel, who is our guru, uh, I always joke and say he's my boyfriend, but he doesn't know it yet. He would say, um, this is vitamin C to children, connection and care. And, we also know that this is true for all of us. This is not just true for kids, but like, if we have time for fun in our world, and if we're sleeping better, we are better. We look at our partners or people around us and we can tell when they're tired because they're cranky, they say no, they don't want to, it's really hard. So like, when we don't get enough sleep and we don't get enough fun time, then that's really, really hard. We also, want to make sure that our kids are not hungry or their blood sugars are not dysregulated. You're going to get the monster out of the cave when people's blood sugars are dysregulated. And when we see, those, when food has been stretched out for longer periods of time, or what people are eating is kind of really overprocessed, lots of sugary food, you're going to see more emotional dysregulation. So And I'll just do one more, like the full day workshop or the 5 week series. We're going to do a whole lot more about this, but like it's really super important for us to be role modeling. Oh my gosh, I'm starting to feel a little upset. I'm going to go do this in order to help myself. Or I'm feeling kind of cranky now. Maybe I need to go out for a walk. And we actually are role modeling that. And we're saying those things. And after we come back from our walk, we go, wow, I'm really glad I did that because I feel like I'm a little bit more grounded now because I did that, right? We need to be really good guides for our kids. And that's emotional literacy, that we can't be scared of emotions, and we can't be accepting of some and we don't like others. So anyway, I'm going to stop here now and see if people have got some questions. We've got about 8 minutes for questions and or comments. And just to let people know, we've got 5 weeks planned for to run through our regulated workshop. We're trying to kind of create bigger paradigm shifts for our neurodiverse families, where we're going to talk a whole lot more about the brain science and nervous system co-regulation, more strategies and being strategic. And I just want to thank everybody who came tonight. And if some people have got to take off and you've got some kids to put to bed or laundry to do or whatever, know that we'll send out your certificates and also the replay of the event tonight. So if anybody's got any questions, we can do that. Jennifer Cox, right? Go ahead, Jennifer.
Hi, thank you so much. This was actually so good for me. I have a 9-year-old and a 14-year-old, and unfortunately I'm guilty, especially with my 14-year-old, of some of the things that you were speaking of. If I was to, and I'm definitely